This is Rowena Starling welcoming you to the Save Your Breath show, where we help parents eliminate the stress and aggravation of parenting. You may notice a little tweak there in what I do. It occurred to me recently, just because of my own experience, that the parenting doesn't stop because the child is grown. So I am offering my services not only to people who are still raising their children, but also to the parents who are struggling with issues even though their children are now grown. The problems don't stop, like I said, just because they're grown. Do you have an issue with co-parenting or being a single parent? Well, our guest today is Ms. Tori Amos, and she is here to help us iron out some of those issues. We have some questions that we want to put to her. Do you happen to know someone who has an issue with that? I myself, as a single parent when my son was growing up, had quite a lot of issues with being a single parent. And one of the things that really got to me was when he was with his father. He lived with his father for a while there as I was struggling to get back on my feet. I went through a very difficult time. And there was a moment I distinctly remember when my son came to me, when it's my turn to have him with me, where he shared with me that someone had struck him. One of the women that would come over to hang out with my father at his house, or I don't know who this woman was, but when my son told me this woman had struck him, that she had, I wanted to say spanked him, but I don't even know if it was as sweet as a spank, I just kind of lost my mind, as the mama grizzly would do, to coin the phrase that we will, what's her name? I can't remember exactly. There was a woman that said mama grizzly, and it took over the headlines for a while. In any event, it hit me. And do you know that I kind of lost my mind and went looking for this woman. I wanted to straighten her out. I mean, I had my own anger issues anyway. And so the idea that someone else was laying their hand on my little boy, he had to be probably 4 years old, that I didn't even know, just made me crazy. I went to her job. I don't know if they saw me coming or what the deal was, but it was like, oh no, she's not here. She went on break. When I hung around, waiting for break to be over, I probably hung out there for half an hour to an hour waiting on this woman to come back from wherever she was. No, she wasn't coming back. So what I'm saying is there are all kinds of co-parenting and parenting issues, and that was one of the ones that really stood out that had nothing to do with the communication per se with the father, though we had that kind of as an issue too. But that whole, how do you handle that? What's going on with that? That's my big story. So, if you have anger issues, this is one of the things that I want you to remind you of. If you have anger issues, fears, anxieties over this whole parenting program that we are engaged in, and you would like for me to help you, please do make a point of connecting with me through the parenting assessment. There is a link available here, either showing on the screen or at the end of the show. And let's have a conversation, because I will offer you a complimentary session. It's a $250 value for free, so that we can get to the bottom of it and perhaps alleviate some of that stress and certainly the fears involved with that and the anxiety. Okay? All right. Well, as I said, our guest today is Ms. Tori Amos. She is the author of Conscious Youth. And it's a guide of how to connect with your teen and your youth while building your own spiritual ground. She is a spiritual wellness consultant and a motivational speaker. Tori was recently featured on Hay House Radio to talk about her book and her vision and message for the millennium generation. Tori works with moms to get clear on what it is they want in their life, helps implement strategies and rituals in their daily routine, and her techniques lead to increased productivity and magnified manifestations into the reality of her clients' relationships personal and family life. If you want to connect with Tori and purchase her book here, we will show you the link on the show. And she would prefer you go through that link, though you can buy the book on Amazon. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you, Tori.
Thanks for having me.
We have a few questions that we wanted to place toward you today, as soon as I get myself together.
Okay.
Now, from a communication standpoint,
Yes.
what is the best way to communicate or co-parent with your ex about the challenges around your children that they are facing at the other parent's house, at the ex's house, with the ex, and perhaps the ex's now spouse or partner, without triggering the ex and the partner or the partner and sounding disrespectful or undermining? This can also be relevant for other authority figures such as the teachers or anyone else that has some authority figure over your child, that's an authority figure over your child. So from that standpoint, what's the best way to do this co-parenting thing?
Well, that's a very important question, and it can allow for lots of triggers to happen. And this is a great way to practice conscious communication. And there's a strategy that I've used that's been very successful. And that strategy is to come up with an appointment, actually schedule a time to speak with your ex-partner or the teacher, whomever it is, and say, hey, do you have some time to talk about Sarah or Andrew, reminding the other person that it's about the child that you want to speak with them. And then also practicing conscious communication with nonviolent communication and not having a tone of blame or fear or triggering or threatening, because you might be very anxious about the reason that you want to talk to them about Sarah and Andrew. You know, reminding yourself and reminding the other that we're talking about the child here, and we want to come up with a clear resolution. And speaking of a place that's empathetic, that's grounded, that's centered, and that is a problem-solving place. And within conscious communication, there's 4 different steps. And one is the observation, observing factually what the situation may be at hand. The second is your feeling around what the situation may be, and their feeling what the situation may be, and an action that needs to be required. Say, hey, you know, I need an action to happen here. There's something that needs to change, and verbalizing that need that needs to change. And a lot of the times when you speak very clearly, very consciously in your communication, letting them know that there's something happening that's not working at their household, and how can we remedy that in a very professional way, a lot of the times things can be remedied very quickly.
Yeah, you bring up a good point, because I distinctly remember in my engagement with this whole process with my son's father when we separated, I did a lot of in-the-moment communication that was not very nice.
That's where the scheduling comes in.
There was no scheduling. Really, we were jumping right in and handling that right now, and especially, so that's great for respecting the space of the person and catching your breath before you fly off of the handle. So that goes to having all those different emotions you have going on anyway that get in the way.
Yes.
And
recognizing your triggers as well, you know, because we get triggered too. Because it's very emotional when we talk about our child. And learning to breathe, to center, to ground, what I talk about in my book, is having your own spiritual ground. So instead of flying off of the handle, actually taking the moment to breathe, to center, to bring it back to the reason you're talking to the individual in the first place. Again, it's for the child, the welfare of the child, and not about you, not about him or her, about the child.
Yeah, that's stopping in the moment. That's one of my big ones. You know, that's one of the things that I want the parents to be paying attention to. Write this down. Stop in the moment. Thank you very much for that one.
You're welcome.
Well, from a communication standpoint, is there a technique to getting your teenagers to open up to you more about the issues surrounding their lives and their friends' lives, such as sex, drugs, alcohol, disorderly friends? I like the way you put that. Disorderly friends, without sounding like a nag.
Right. Right. Well, it's everywhere. You know, social media, TV, radio, anywhere you go, there's sex, there's drugs, and there's hip hop, you know? And so I was a field trip mom. I was the play date mom. I was the chauffeur. I still am the chauffeur because I wanted to be around my daughter and her friends.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to hear the conversations, meet the friends, see what was going on so that I could be part of the conversations when issues arise.
Mm-hmm.
And talking about them, the good, the bad, the in-between, what's going on. So they're used to communicating with you about anything so that when the topics arise that may be a little uncomfortable, you can get past the uncomfortable part because they're so used to talking to you about things. And then, mentioning, how do you feel about that song? How do you feel about that TV show? Or what do you think about this? So that they have a way to express themselves and you're not putting shame or blame or fear, that's a bad thing. You're just opening the conversation up to them. So that, yeah, when they become teenagers, young adults, you can get down to the nitty-gritty about sex, drugs, information that's really prevalent to them, to be able to disarm them and be able to talk to them when something that could be potentially damaging to them. And honestly, Rowena, to be the sake of feeling like a nag or sounding like a nag is okay in my book to prevent a potentially dangerous situation for your child or another child.
Yeah, that to me it's like having them reading to your child when they're young.
Yeah.
As they grow, you need to be talking to them all the time and having conversations. It's like exercising that part of the brain that has them respect what you have to say and seek out your opinion because they're used to talking to you.
Yes, keep them talking.
Yeah, that's a very important point. Well, I want to thank you for giving me that answer because I had a tendency at the time to be a very authoritarian when I was talking with my son. And he didn't always appreciate it. But the nagging part, well, I came out with a CD about that because I thought that was the way to go. And still, you have a tendency to have to do it every now and then, but not necessarily the best way to do it.
Right. Yeah, you want them to be able to hear you without that wall.
So, Tori,
yes,
from a communication standpoint, what is your advice when a conversation with a member of your household is turning negative? Someone or even you may feel triggered. How can you bring it back to a positive note quickly?
Yes. That can also be a heated question, a heated moment for people. And that's when conscious communication comes in. The practices in my book, meditation, yoga, mindfulness. When you have these daily practices, you're able to tap into that grounded moment, that centered moment. So when someone is triggering you, yelling at you, maybe even passively slamming a door or a cabinet, and you have to have a conversation with this person, you are in a grounded place. They may not be. But again, being able to speak in a nonviolent communication of no blame, no shame, no triggering, and saying, hey, can we have a conversation about what's going on? And then sometimes, often, Rowena, people just want to be heard. They just want to you make sure that they're being heard. So then you let them talk and practice conscious listening. They can talk for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and then when they're done, you can say, thank you, I heard you. You said X, Y, and Z. Not ad-libbing, putting in any of your emotions into it. Just saying, hey, this is what you said. Thank you very much for saying that. So now may I speak now? Getting their permission to have your 5 minutes, your 10 minutes to go ahead and say, this is how I am feeling. And hopefully it'll go back and forth that way till you can come to some good communication and resolution. But in any event, if it doesn't, say, hey, can we take 5 minutes? Can we take a breath? I'm going to take a deep breath now. You want to take a deep breath with me? I'm going to walk out of the room right now. I'll be back in 5 minutes, and we're going to keep talking about this. And then, hey, if you need to take a walk, go take a drive, get yourself out of that situation, and come back when you're clear, when they're clear, and let them know if you do need to exit, that you'll be thinking about what they are saying, and you're going to come back in a more centered way to communicate with them to get to a resolution that works.
Yes. Yes, 20/20 hindsight for me. If I knew then what I know now about communication, about being conscious in the moment, how different could my life have been? We always want to look at that. Well, let's look forward now.
Mm-hmm.
People are tuning in to see how they can do it better now. All these conveniences and technologies weren't available to us before.
Mm-hmm.
I can see us all going forward now with a much better grasp of what it takes to make it work on the communication end. Being conscious yourself is key to that.
Yes.
Because the triggering happens because people are unconscious.
We all get triggered.
Yeah.
And if you can be the voice, be that light, the reflection of, hey, I can talk to you in a calm manner, and because you're practicing your daily practices of centering, then that hopefully will reflect on them too. Maybe not, but you can give it a try or come back to a situation.
Yeah, well, what I find too, that if you are truly practicing, what happens is you have far less of these triggering incidents. I think it's Buddha, one of those guys, that says when you sit, everybody sits.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so if you want to have a peaceful, harmonious home, it's very helpful to have your own practice so that there are far fewer of these incidents. And because it's an ongoing thing that you're doing in the home, even when you're away and you're encountering people, like you said, who have these issues, it's easier for you to stay there and kind of bring them into the peace with you.
Bring them in.
Be
the example.
Yeah. Well, you know, they can feel it. Suddenly they are truncating their own anger because
Animals
for
feel
some
it.
reason. Yeah, right.
My cat will come to me when I'm meditating and she'll sit down next to me.
Exactly.
Because it's a peaceful place. And exude that in your home every day as much as you can. So every time you enter into your sanctuary, the people around you are feeling that in your household. And it even goes through, you know, the conversation that you're having with someone that's on the other side, because you're in that centered, grounded place. And it's really hard for the other person to keep persisting. They can, but if you're being that example of being grounded and centered, then hopefully they'll take, you know, your lead.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. So now, from a communication standpoint, and I keep saying that because this first quarter of the year is about communication. So I want to be consistent in how we're presenting the information, though it's going to be all over the place ultimately because everything is communication.
Yes.
What is the best way to have healthy communications with your children and have them feel as though they want to come back to you to check in and ask questions about what's going on in their life instead of looking it up online first?
Oh, yes.
Or getting the information from their schoolmates and having to go with that because they don't know anything else.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
That could be dangerous sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, you know, it's so easy with technology today. Even on my smartphone, I can just push a little button, speak into it, and ask Google or Siri, whatever it is that you want. And not that the Wikipedia answer is the baddest thing in the world, but you want your child to be able to communicate with you and get your response before they get just a black and white picture of it, right? And so we practice a daily ritual, which I'm really into for our home, and it's what's your goal for the day? What's your goal for the day, Maya? That's my daughter. What's your goal for the day, Mom? And then that way we're opening up the conversation, and I may be very knowledgeable on what her goal is. Most of the time I am, so that I can help her out. And she's like, oh, Mom may know this. So let me go back and ask my mom. She'll probably Google it too. But at least there's that balance of asking Mom, you know, or her aunties or her father, what it is that she's trying to accomplish or question that she might have, because of that keeping in communication the good, the bad, the in between. So that opens up the conversation every morning of, hey, what's your goal for the day? And then we close the day, we get back home, we have dinner, we get settled. What was your highlight of the day? And then she can say, oh, my highlight was, you know, I got an A on my test, or I had lunch with my good friend. And then so, oh, what was your test on? Tell me about it, so that I can maybe put my input into it too. So again, keeping that communication open, the conscious communication open, so they feel more comfortable talking to you than going to talk to a friend, which is okay, or going to Google, which is okay. But the part of the conversation is keeping them communicating with you.
Well, I really like what you say about that, because you're initiating and keeping this open line of communication going, morning and evening, so that even if she does encounter information online or from one of her friends, she has a go-to person to check that information.
Mm-hmm.
I
What
mean,
do you think about
that's
this?
key. Yeah,
Yeah, they're
especially if
going to.
it's like way out of left field of what mom would say, or this is strange or feels strange. Let me go
Yeah.
check it with mom. See, this having that open line of communication is.
It's very key. It's very key. And, you know, she's 15 now, and some parents, lots of moms who go, oh, has she said she hated you yet? Or that you're dumb yet? And I'm like, what? You know, she's never said those things to me. Hopefully she won't. But it's the standpoint of being like, mom knows what's going on. I talk to my mom every day about whatever we talk about. So I understand that she's a smart woman because we keep things going on. And I may say something stupid. She might be like, what, mom? Stop dancing in the grocery store. You know, you're embarrassing me. But at the same time, is we keep it cool. We keep a clear conversation so that she can ask me and say anything that she wants.
You know, and what you're saying is kind of key, too, about this whole thing. Has she said that she hates you yet or things like that? I have these feelings about my mother. She was a very authoritarian person. She had a heavy hand. I thought that in my mind. I just hate that woman. But I would never say it to her because, you know, that would be the end of my life. But you can feel the difference of what's going on with you and your daughter, you know, because it feels good. It feels open. There's a sharing. That's a completely different thing, right?
Yeah,
and if your kid is feeling like they're inclined to say that they hate you, something kind of went off left field that you might want to check on.
Right.
Right? And that's the feeling. I don't know how aware my mother has passed. So I don't know how aware she was, or she had some awareness, but where we are today in the world is so vastly different from what was happening in the 40s and 50s.
Oh,
Actually,
sure.
I was born in the 50s, so 50s and 60s. I would like to think that we're getting everyone on board with having this kind of free-flowing, good feeling going with our families and our children, and because there's so much else in the world that gets in the way that can mess that up.
Yeah, and no matter what it is, sometimes we have very hard communication.
And throw it in left field.
Yeah, we don't want to talk about some of the things that can be hard: sex, drugs, boyfriends, cars, driving, different things, friends I may not agree with. But I tell her, and she tells me, you know, there's nothing going to come between us. Whether I feel like you're right or wrong, I will tell you my opinion. But we're going to get through this together because we have a love and a communication. And Rowena, you know, I just want the best for her and the best for the millennium generation.
Yeah.
And the kids that are being born now, you know, because they are tomorrow's leaders. They're our next presidents, our next lawyers, our next world leaders, doctors, TV hosts. And we need a strong foundation for our future for tomorrow. And that's the reason why I wrote my book. That's the reason why I'm here today, is because it's very much on my heart and passion to be able to teach the next generation of how to be strong, powerful, have open, conscious communication for the good of tomorrow.
Our lives are going to be in their hands in a minute.
Very soon.
So if we don't do our jobs the way we need to do them, who knows what it's going to be, you know, down the line when we're really
they'll be scrolling on their iPhones like, what? I'm supposed to do what?
But now we're old and fragile and at the mercy of what? You know, we need to know what the what is going to be.
Right.
I'm very selfish about that, as if you can tell from my prior conversations. And just let me ask you one last question.
Sure.
In this technical age, what are some of tech-free tips for the whole family? Because I have a respect for technology, but I do know that it's sucking the soul of our children, and some adults actually. What can you tell us? Give us some tips.
Yeah. Well,
aside from running out into the forest and screaming while on the beach.
Well, you know, it can create some PST. It can create post-traumatic stress for people when they're on that screen, especially children. You take it away from them.
Post-traumatic stress?
Yes, you can see what happens with it.
What?
Well, the blue light on the screen decreases our melatonin in our bodies. And so we think it's daylight all the time. So 30 minutes before you go to bed, for anyone, you should not look at the screen because your body psychologically thinks it's awake. It's daytime.
Right.
So then you're not going to be able to sleep very well. And so we have a no phone zone in our home. 30 minutes when we wake up in the morning, you should be waking up. you should be doing your daily practice or getting yourself organized and set for the day. 30 minutes before you go to bed, at dinner time, different things like that. When you're out having dinner or taking a nature walk, and a lot of times the parents are so stuck on the phone. They're so stuck on the computers too. So it's the time to unplug. Take your kids out for a walk, take them out for a venture, so that they're not watching you. Again, you know, that following the lead, being the example, and giving them a time limit. You can be on the phone for 1 hour. You can be on the phone for 2 hours. Whatever it is that they need to cut out the no phone zone.
Thank you, Tori. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for joining us here on the Save Your Breath show. I look forward to seeing you again in the next 2 weeks.